And now, it's time once again for the show that gives glorious voice to 25 million business owners across the fruited plain. Radio Free Enterprise with Frank Felker.
Thank you, Dude Walker. Yes, indeed, I am Frank Felker. Welcome back to Radio Free Enterprise. My guest today is Roger London, a retired angel investor and current technology investing expert based in Columbia, Maryland. Roger London, welcome back to Radio Free Enterprise.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
You and I first met, I can't believe it's been 7 years. We were just talking about that. 2014, we shared the stage in an event at George Washington University called Semper Startup that was focused on helping vetrepreneurs get their startups up and running. And then a couple of years later, you were kind enough to appear as a guest on the audio podcast edition of Radio Free Enterprise. And now we're back together again to talk about something called SBIR and how it's a potential channel to help technology startups find their way to a point where they might be able to attract the attention of venture capitalists or the investment community at large. So I want to start with this, Roger, and I'm going to pick this up and read it because I'm sure I would not be able to memorize this. This is the definition of SBIR from the SBIR.gov website. The Small Business Innovation Research Program is a highly competitive program that encourages domestic small businesses to engage in federal research/research and development with the potential for commercialization. Now, that sounds like a lot of federal gobbledygook. What exactly does that mean, or just in general, if we were to try to tie together a company that's got some technology they want to bring to market, and they're trying to work with one of the government agencies through SBIR? How does that all come together, Roger?
Well, I'm pleasantly surprised that their definition, if you think about it and go through it slowly, is actually pretty spot on. So the government, I don't remember when, decided to help small businesses try to bridge that valley of death that you've heard about all the time. It's too early for investors to get in. The technology might yet be a little squishy for the customers to feel comfortable with. So the government decided to take a slice of every agency's budget and put it into SBIR funding. I think it's $3.5 or $4 billion a year now. And wow. It's a percentage of agency budget. So the, DOD and NIH and HHS and DHS are the larger, shareholders of money distributed for SBIRs. It's getting up near $4 million.
Let me just give an example. I think it'd be easier to tie it together with a real life example. Maybe a month or so ago, I had a guy on who's from a med tech startup, medical technology. And they've got this wild machine that you put on your head and it connects to your brain with electrodes on your skull and all kinds of stuff. And it has a variety of applications, some of which are good for people who have communication difficulties, like they have ALS or other ways that they just can't speak. But it also, as my guest told me, it has military applications and other scientific applications. Let's say this guy were to try to use SBIR to advance their product or get to market. How would that work? Does he reach out to the DOD? Where do you start?
Sure. So some simple Googling SBIR, SBIR.gov. Each agency issues broad agency announcements, and they tell the public that, for instance, upcoming for DOE, I think it's April 21st is the deadline for one of their SBIRs. So they have a topic list on the website. If you have a technology that addresses one of their high areas of need, one of their high energy targets, then you submit an application for it. It goes sequential. There's a bit of a sequence to it. So SBIR ones is $50,000 to $250,000. It generally takes 6 or 12 months for you to start the testing. And the SBIR1 purpose is to validate the tech, to prove that it works, whether it's just a mathematical model, whether it's on a lab bench, just prove that the tech works. If you get the SBIR1 and you prove that it works, you can submit for an SBIR2. SBIR2s then, so your medtech company could prove that their technology works, and then in 6 or 12 months they could reapply for a phase 2. And phase 2, again, depending on the agency, are like $500,000 to $1.5 million.
Oh, wow.
And you can use that money for a year to 2 years. I find that most entrepreneurs try to milk out everything over those 2 years, and I'm constantly banging them on the head like, you're getting the same amount of money. Can't
Sure.
you accelerate time to market and get out there? You don't have to be 2 years. So anyway, so you can use it up to 2 years. And so what you use that money for is, ideally you have a commercialization partner or somebody that wants to do an MVP test, a potential customer that's willing to do a pilot test,
viable product.
like, so you can prove the MVP works in working conditions, right? In scale environments.
Great.
And
well, if I could, let me interrupt you, because I want to, I always try to put myself in the seat of, let's say in this case, a scrambling startup founder who's trying to find some money or trying to find a way to bring their big idea to market. So let me just make sure I understand. So these application periods only happen once a year, is that correct?
It could be once or twice a year. They're spaced throughout the year. It's not the same date every year.
So it's not like I can just fill out an application anytime I want and see if anybody's interested.
There are exceptions but for the large part, correct. You have to follow a schedule.
And then it's probably is it a requirement that my technology is in alignment with one of the things that the agency is interested in, that you mentioned they would have a list of? If my technology is not in alignment, am I wasting my time to put in an application?
Most likely, because just like when you go to an investor, you're competing for the dollars that they're going to spend somewhere. And so if the investor has priority needs, they put those dollars against that. It's the same with the agencies. So you may have a great technology that could solve huge problems, but if it's not, a high demand for them, it doesn't matter.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm so glad I asked you that question, because just like within an investor, they are an investor. And you've got to be in alignment with what they're thinking. Okay, so then let's say you said this one was coming up in April. Let's say I put in my application. How long before I hear whether I've been accepted or not?
So it has been accelerating. They've gotten better at it. So it takes a month to a couple of months, a few months, depending upon the agency. Used to take 6 months or 8 months, right?
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds pretty fast for the feds.
Yeah, it is. And like, it's so many things I want to say. I don't want to leave anything out, but
I'm trying. Part of my job here is to try to guide you down the path from the perspective of the questions that the person listening wants to know. And so right here, what I'm trying to do is just take it through the sequential, what happens next kind of thing. So let's say it's 90 days and I hear back. When do I get my money?
Not too long after that.
Really?
Yeah. So this SBIR2, if you hadn't gotten a 1 and done well on it, you're not going to get a 2. You can't just start in the middle. Mm-hmm. So for the folks who had a 1 for DOE, this specific example, and
Department of Energy,
Department of Energy, and it worked out well, and their review board likes what they did, and they proved that they proved what they said they could prove. That's really the point. Mm-hmm. Then they say, okay, so for phase 2, part of your application is up to a 10 or 12 or 15 page commercialization plan. So you're going to tell them during or after your phase 2 how you're going to commercialize this. So they're really keen on not just investing into research for research's sake. The purpose of this, and they've gotten better at it over time, is to help things get into market. So I can't tell you how many brilliant engineers and scientists I've talked to who had game-changing stuff, but they had no idea how to get it to market. And so their commercialization plan really buried them because they just thought it was the magic mousetrap that everybody would,
Right.
flock to, where they didn't know how to sell it, right? They didn't know how to say the right messaging, or they didn't know the true value proposition to the client. There's a lot of similarities in most SBR winners, or where their shortfalls are, and we can talk about that later.
And I was going to say, and these are areas where you're able to really help them and to
Absolutely.
bring it to commercialization. And believe me, we will get to that. But again, I'm kind of going down the yellow brick road one step at a time.
Yeah.
All right, so we won a phase 1 grant, and we get our
Yes.
money, and we have to have 12 months, you say, to spend that, or to meet
6 to
certain
12
milestones?
months. Yeah.
Okay.
I always try to get clients to compress it because there's time kills all deals, right?
Yeah.
You just shorten your time to market.
Got to have that sense of urgency, or you are lost.
You really do.
Okay, and so then I apply for my phase 2. And
Yes.
and you just stated it, but if you could just quickly recap, what do I have to have done successfully during phase 1 to qualify? I had to prove the technology. Was there anything else I had to do?
Largely no. I mean, and even in the phase 1, they're kind of looking for larger, bigger problems. They're hoping that you can cure cancer and not a headache.
I got him. Okay.
Right. So if you can prove, even just mathematically, right, or on a lab model, that this thing will work, if you give me money later, I'll prove that this math that I just did, I can do out in the field. And
That's
so that's
awesome.
what the phase 2 is for.
I like that. Well, and this is the kind of public good that people look to their federal government to provide efficiently. Okay,
Yeah.
so I did that in phase 1 and I applied for phase 2. Do I get a response back faster in phase 2 because there's fewer of us and you already know who I am?
There are fewer of you, and you do have a relationship with the agency. That's a really good point. But the process still is the same, and there's more to actually evaluate in phase 2. The risk, something like 30% of all phase 1 winners get a phase 2 grant. So
Wow.
still
That's
more than half don't get it.
Yeah.
But, it's just like if you're thinking about the venture world, how many people get a B round that got an A round? Right. It keeps getting skinnier, right, as you go down. So it's just the same.
Okay. Now you said to me in a pre-interview meeting that you think that these programs are widely underused. Why do you say that? How might they be better used?
Well, I mean, you're getting honestly the cheapest capital that you could. It's possible. That is possible. So you're getting money that doesn't impact your balance sheet or your cash flow, because it's not like a loan that you've got to pay back. You're getting money that doesn't dilute your equity, which means you have more to negotiate with investors later, or if things work out well for you, your pile is bigger, right? The government doesn't get any equity. And you don't have to share IP rights, intellectual property rights. So, this is one of those programs that I think does really great work. The more effective at it they get, the better. But a large driver at it was that old chicken or egg problem, was that you can't get investor money until you have, a proven tech or customers, or, everything has been de-risked. But you can't do that unless you have some money. So the purpose of this government program is to try to bridge that gap where you can spend money on research, because investors hate to spend money on research, right? So you can develop the thing, you can prove that it works. In phase 2, ideally, you prove that it works with a customer in a customer environment, right? So it's not just working in a lab sterile environment. It's working out in the street with dirt and rocks and people stepping on it, or whatever, the tech is.
That's great. Yeah. And these are experiences that these types of technologists need to have. Because
and then they can refine their widget based off of all the feedback, right? So
I want to make one thing. I want to make sure that one thing's clear, because I wasn't clear about this until I asked you previously. this is only for technology research and for technology business models, not for other types of research or other types of businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're funding widgets for the most part, not service companies.
Okay, high-tech widgets.
High tech widgets.
All right. And could you just lay out maybe just a few ideas, for example, cybersecurity, medtech, I don't know, and a few of the agencies that are really engaging with this?
Sure. Well, I mean, DoD is probably the biggest tent, and each of their branches has SBIR funds allocated to it, all the way down to at DHS, their S&T. So DoD has DARPA.
Okay. Now, if we could real
And
quickly, DOD is Department of Defense, and
sorry,
DHS
right.
is Department of Homeland Security, and DARPA is Defense Applications Research. Uh-oh, I lost it right there.
Program agency, I forget. It's for
Okay.
rapid prototyping is really what it's for.
Great. And okay, and so obviously Department of Defense is a real big one. Now, don't you also work with the Department of Energy?
I do. I just happen to build. My background is in military and DHS, DoD and DHS, and the intelligence community largely. I happened to strike up. A woman attended a entrepreneur conference, entrepreneur presentation I gave, and she said, I would love for all of my grant winners. She was a pivotal in the DOE programs. And she said, I would love for my entrepreneurs, my winners, to hear this, because I was talking about different kinds of capital available for entrepreneurs. I promoted SBIR in my presentation. And things that entrepreneurs need to think about, common issues that stop entrepreneurs from being successful. And it was, there was no rosy picture about entrepreneurship. I was pretty direct and pretty honest. Some of it was a little brutal, but she said my grant winners would really appreciate this. So I've been speaking to her SBIR 1 and SBIR 2 grant winners for a couple of years. Then I got invited by EPA to do it with them.
Environmental Protection Agency.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
It's all right.
And so I have met some fantastic people. I think the folks running the SBIR programs at those two agencies really care about the agencies and the mission statement, but also the people that they invest in and how the programs work. Are they effective? Can they improve them? So, I find that in most of the SBIR programs that I've worked with.
And so on SBIR.gov, and you may not know this to answer this question, this is kind of a tech minutia, but would I be able to maybe find a list of the agencies that have SBIR programs there?
There is more than enough stuff out there, and it's pretty easy to navigate through too. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I feel as though I'm getting a pretty good picture. I've got some kind of a widget idea, and I apply for and receive, we'll just say for the sake of argument, a phase 1 grant from Department of Energy for a new way of capturing solar energy or something.
Right.
And then over the course of a few months and at an accelerated rate, with a sense of urgency, I prove the technology either on a breadboard or a spreadsheet or actual out there on a roof somewhere. And then I apply for and receive a phase 2 grant. And it seems to me from our conversations, Roger, that this is sort of where you start leaning in. This is like your sweet spot, that the company has completed the phase 1. Maybe they're about to apply, or they have applied, or they have received their phase 2 grant. And now your business expertise and your investment capital and community relationships and expertise really come to bear to help them. Is that right?
Yes, I get hired by a lot of SBIR 1 companies during their project. And during that time, I exercise them, and I ask them a lot of things to get them to make sure. A lot of these entrepreneurs don't know what they don't know, right? Sometimes they don't know what's important to think about. And, you can't make a first impression twice, as the saying goes. So as they're doing their one, I want them to think about who are all the stakeholders. If this thing becomes real, gets to market, who are all the stakeholders, right? Who are the potential channel partners? Are there wholesalers in the middle? Are there contractors in the middle? Who's the eventual customer, right? What's that whole ecosystem look like? And what's the value proposition to each of them? And so even back in the phase one, we start to work on messaging a little bit, right? Making sure that you're getting the what's in it for me clear to who each of the stakeholders, because it's important that they start thinking about that. So as they're validating their phase one, they're thinking about the goal line of who their customer is, right? In your solar example, their customer might end up being the contractors who install solar panels on the roofs and not the homeowners themselves.
Great example.
So you have to know what your customer wants. For them, it might be making more margin. It might be, easier to install or fewer returns, or that's the value prop to the contractor. To the homeowner, all I want to know is how much energy is it saving me, right?
Sure.
So the value prop changes for each of the stakeholders.
May I interrupt you, because I have to figure that everything you just said there, all the questions that you posed and all the stakeholders that you identified, is that an area where most of these technologists, like you said, they didn't even know what they didn't know, that they didn't even think that these were things that they needed to take into consideration?
Yes, and especially early in a phase one. And considering that when you're done your one, you apply for the two, and part of it is a commercialization plan. So you have to have thought of these things in your commercialization plan and clearly articulate, we know who the stakeholders are. We know what the value prop of our tech is to all of them. Here's what we think it is. Here's how we're going to play in this ecosystem. And, here is our messaging to each of our stakeholders. You also have to have your go-to-market plan and the commercialization plan for phase two.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to start thinking about, and actually DOE and all agencies have a little market research money that they have a contractor that will do market research for you. So I try to have them maximize the market research from these contractors for the agencies, to say, make sure that they research who the stakeholders are, right? And when you do the go-to-market, who are you going to go to market with? Make sure they've done the research to show you who that is, because when you do the commercialization plan for your phase two app, you have to have a go-to-market strategy. And so you can't just say, we're going to go to trade shows and we're going to send out some emails. I read recently one of a potential client was saying that we've reached out to the top 15 companies in this marketplace, and they think that's great. And being glasses half empty as a former investor, right, and as a consistent, what's wrong with this picture? Sending an email to everybody doesn't do anything. You don't know if they're involved. If you survey 100 people and ask them if they would like this product, if all 100 say yes, all you know is that 100 people would like this. You still have 0 customers, right? But a lot of entrepreneurs hang their hat on people like something, right?
Well, and as you and I know, until somebody pulls out a checkbook or a credit card, you got nothing. You got squat douche.
And the check cleared.
Right, that's right. Yeah. Okay, now with that in mind, I'm trying to think, didn't you talk about it in our previous conversation about the idea of even getting them in a relationship with a prospective client? In other words, a company that will help them test their widget, and if it works, will at least agree to verbally, will become a customer. Is that something you help them with as well?
Well, I help them evaluate the terms. I don't do any specific negotiating for them, right? Or I don't go find a company for them, but they'll say, oh, this company has a standard sheet that they, a contract that they do. And we look through the terms and see if there's, minimum standards and timeframes. And, what we're really looking for is something like a contribution agreement. The entrepreneur is going to bring this to the table. They're going to contribute this. It's this much tech. Will help update your manufacturing line. We'll pay for these things that have to be adjusted in your manufacturing line. You bring your resources of the plant and the manufacturing line to bear, and then we'll test it in one of your, maybe it's a system of a larger, it's a component of a larger system. Mm-hmm. So then we'll put our new widget that we both built into your, systems that you sell, and we'll test it. We'll make sure that it is 20% faster and 30% lighter and cost 10% less to build, and blah blah blah, all of these things that we thought it would be. Mm-hmm. We want to prove the value proposition during phase 2.
Now, and I want to put the link to our previous interview, and I will put it in the show notes for this interview. But we talked a lot, and how does a company communicate with the investment world, and what is it that investors want to hear? And you talked about green lights and red flags and all kinds of stuff. And I'm sure all of this applies here. But with a lot of times when a startup company that's not doing SBR brings in investment capital, one of the things they're looking for is a strategic investor. Maybe this person has a Rolodex where they know you could partner with this guy. I know this guy from 20 years ago. This company over here, I know will buy this widget if it works. It seems as though that's sort of absent from this, and maybe it's okay because they haven't gotten to that point yet. But what would you recommend to a startup who's maybe in the middle of phase 2 about how more successfully than just sending an email to reach out and potentially develop relationships with partner companies?
So, how to market to them is you probably know marketing better than I do. The actual tools, I work with a marketing firm, Optomotive, that does this. But the way that they do it depends on who you're trying to build a relationship with. What I'd like to say, based off of what you just said, is there's different levels of phase 2 partners, right? At the least valuable, but still very valuable, is somebody who agrees to test your widget in a scalable environment to prove that it works. It's a customer, and there's no guarantees. They agree to try it. So that's better than nothing. The second layer is a potential customer who will agree to try it, and you can negotiate with them that if it works under these pre-agreed conditions, that you'll buy it. You'll buy X over some period of time, and that can always grow. But if it works, you'll buy it. The next most valuable or type of strategic partner in that phase 2 would be a potential customer who's willing to buy it and or could be a strategic investor. So corporate venture capital, CVC, is I believe really underrated, just like these SBIRs, underutilized and underknown. That's not the right word. Not very well known as great sources of capital. And so a corporation, like I used to be a corporate VC for Nokia. And my job was to go out and find things that we would embed into our platform in a couple of years. So we would invest in things that we could become the anchor customer for. Oh. And most VCs won't participate unless there is an anchor customer. So we took out the risk for other investors as Nokia by investing in something, getting all the hair off of it, trying it, putting it in our platform, and now we're putting our money where our mouth is. Now other VCs will clearly follow that investment in later rounds because the market has proven it will adopt it, right? That it's interested.
This is such great information, Roger. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. Now, let's say we're coming to the end of the phase 2, And I love that, get all the hair off of it. But we're coming to a sort of a hairy period here because now, we're running out of that sweet federal money, and we've either done or we haven't done what we had set out to do. What does success look like coming out of phase two, and what should a startup company really look to be doing after that's over?
So I'll put that in three buckets. Right. One is a investor bucket. One is a continued government bucket. And the third is just moving forward without investor money or agency anymore, and just selling directly to the market. So hopefully you're in a position where you don't need more money. The tech has been validated. Maybe you're just going to build a lifestyle business. You're not trying to conquer the world and sell 1 million units a month or whatever it is. You just want to make sure your kids go to college, right? Sure. And that you don't have to sell the house and the last kid to pay for the other kids to go to college. So the investor bucket, investors invest, specifically VCs especially, but angels also, and equity. But angels and VCs are probably the next home investor sources for a phase two graduate. They want to make sure that the technology, they want de-risked companies. And they look at three different things when you're de-risking. I want to make sure the tech is de-risked. And that is done through the phase one and phase two, proven that it works. So the investors want to see that the technology risk has been removed, that it works, right? The second thing is they want a de-risked team. This is VCs and angels. So part of your phase two in your commercialization plan is that you're supposed to talk about the management team and make sure that the SBIR review board knows, hey, I'm just an engineer. I've never run a company before. And I realize that I'm self-aware, and I realize that I need salespeople and or operators with business experience, right? Maybe a CFO, this and that. And I have a plan to build that out. Maybe starting toward the end of my phase two, I might bring on somebody who can help me with licensing, right? And the phase two money can pay for this. So, or I might bring on somebody who can help me manage all of the different pilots I got. They could become the role of COO later on, right? So if you prove that you are self-aware about your management skills and deficits, that VCs can now feel that the team is being de-risked. You've heard the expression that they bet on the jockey, not the horse. That's usually true. Mm-hmm. So here you want to give them comfort that the team has a plan, right? And that holes will be filled appropriately. And then the last thing that investors like to do, and of course I'm making a gross generalization here, but I think this is fairly true, that they want to make sure that the market interest has been de-risked. And so they want to make sure that customers want to buy this stuff. And so during your phase two, you're getting the MVP out there with a customer, you're getting customer validation. And then if you can show, I've got some letters of intent, right, from the people who were doing my pilot testing. And so that is an opportunity for you to de-risk the market risk by generating that those potential customers. So that's two of the three buckets. The last bucket for the phase two graduate is to continue doing business with the government. This is really important. The government, SBIRs have sort of an SBIR 2A, a 2B, a 2C, where they can put some more money in if you meet certain conditions. Like if you have outside matching money, they'll match it. And there's a few other things which aren't worth going into at this point. But the most important thing is that there is such a thing as called the SBIR 3. And the SBIR 3 is a non-compete bid and contract that you can get with your SBIR parent agency. So for instance, DOD wants you to build some widget that gives extra battery life to the warfighters, right? Costs like $200 a day for all the batteries that they use in the thermal and the this and the that. So you build something that will dramatically lower the weight and increase the power and the durability and performance of the batteries that warfighters have to carry. You do your phase one, you do your phase two. Well, if this thing works and warfighters tried it as part of your SBIR 2, as part of your validation, well, you can then go to DoD and DoD can give you a contract without putting that contract out to bid for these new types of batteries that you have. And the no bid non-compete, you have to be an SBIR 2 winner, right, to get that. But that's a way to fast track your tech from lab to market in a non-compete. I mean, that is such a huge advantage, and it's nothing illegal, right? You're supplying a solution to something that they didn't have anywhere in the market. That was the point of putting out the SBIR. So by now having an SBIR that provides a solution that nobody else offers, after it's proven that it works, the DoD is like, we're on this. They'll go to Army and, contract with this or that. But so that's really huge.
Sure.
And so I'll make one more point, and then I'll shut up. The difference between getting a grant with DoD and the grant with getting a grant at NIH, for instance, is
National
that
Institutes
NIH
of Health.
doesn't. Right. Sorry.
Sorry.
And NIH doesn't own hospitals, pharmaceuticals, or any of that stuff. So it could never be an SBIR 3 winner. Right? DoD buys and uses the stuff. Right? They got the Army and the Navy and the Marine, all these people. DHS buys and uses this stuff. But EPA is a guidance agency, is a rulemaking agency. Right? So if you build a great new solar panel for your roof, EPA doesn't have anywhere to install those.
That's very interesting.
Right? Or DOE doesn't. Mm-hmm. So if you have something that is energy saving and you could get a grant at DOE, or you could also get it at DoD because it helps the warfighters, or DHS because it helps Border Patrol or whatever. Mm-hmm. Those latter ones have a phase 3 possibility to it. The direct no bid contract. Now, I would suggest that you try for both grants. You can't get 2 grants at the same time to do the same thing.
Okay.
So if you got approved by both, go with the DoD one. Right. But in case the DoD one didn't work, you could still get DOE to fund your research, right, and get you to the proof of concept point, get you to the MVP trials, and now you're sort of on your own for the phase 3. But it's still the free money, right? It's not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. It's still all those great advantages.
That is a great nugget to take away from this conversation.
Crazy.
Now, we're just about out of time, Roger, but there's a couple of, I wouldn't say personal questions, but more about you that I'd like to ask. And I want to start with this, which is, you're at a point in your investing career or your life and whatever. You don't need this. You don't need this aggravation. Why? What is it that brings you to wanting to help these companies that are trying to find their way through this process?
I am semi-retired now. I work with a lot of these kind of entrepreneurs, but I have always been energized by innovation, by entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs are high energy, right? Which you have to be. And the ones that know that they don't know everything, right? And the ones that know that they can get some advice from somebody. I really like helping these folks. I've mentored hundreds and hundreds of companies. And I really enjoy it. And so learning, over the past year, I've learned about nuclear fusion. I've learned about battery tech. I've learned about solar. I've learned about water purification and underground, what you call them? I forgot the word already.
Aquifers and water tables.
Aquifers, thank you. Mm-hmm. So I'm learning about all these new cool things, and I know enough to be dangerous at a cocktail party or something. I still couldn't, I still don't know a lot, but I really like helping the entrepreneurs, and I see myself as sort of an overwatch position, making sure that they don't step on any landmines.
Hmm.
If there's two paths in front of them, making sure that they know that there's a third possible path, and then that they make an informed decision on those three, right? Sometimes they don't even know there's a third path.
Sure.
And, just try to make sure they don't get hosed by contractors or by people that want to do a strategic partnership with them, or investors that are coming in and just taking a bigger slice than it's really worth. Or so, I'm not looking for any equity. I'm not looking for a long-term thing. I'm just here. I'll help you get to phase two if you're in phase one. If you're in phase two, I'll try to help you get commercialization and get money, get to the point, right, where you get all those things later. So
Well,
that's a lot of fun.
yeah, and I love that you said because you enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. You have a passion for it. You're a lifelong learner. You like dealing with high energy entrepreneurs. You like helping people. It's all great stuff. What
And as an aside, they have to be comfortable with my direct nature. Because I'll just tell them what I see, and they yeah.
Well, as you know, business is different. Relationships and business are different. And even in The Godfather, oh, it's nothing personal, Sonny. It's strictly
Yeah,
business. You
yeah.
just have to sort of put on a different face in business. Now, if somebody did want to reach out to you and maybe learn more or ask whether or not you could help their company, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I've got on my LinkedIn page. I've got a one page website that I just put up to show
Mhm.
folks what I do and areas where I could help. They could contact me by email.
Okay,
Um,
so maybe LinkedIn's the best way.
sure.
All right. Well, there's one question I always like to ask on the way out, Roger, and that's whether or not there's a question I should have asked you that I haven't, or a thought that's come to you during our conversation that you wanted to share before we go.
Well, there are many I'd like to share, but with limited time, I would say one of the things that I consistently see with almost all innovation entrepreneurs, and especially SBIRs, because they tend to be more scientific and engineering technical oriented, is their product roadmap really needs to be tightened up. And somebody was telling me I should claim it as my own, but they use the notion of you build your product roadmap based off of putting your features into three categories: game changer, showstopper, or distraction. If you have a game changer tech, and the example is Ring doorbell, right? They've got a tech. Nobody has ever had a way to look at your phone and see who's at the door, right? Awesome tech. Then a showstopper might be, well, if the original Ring doorbells cost $2,000, well, that was a showstopper. So if you're adding things that get it to $2,000, you're taking away the market. You're putting too much stuff in there. So you have to make sure that you're not building a feature map that's actually hurting your time to market. And then the last bucket is distraction, and this is really a good example of in the Ring doorbell. Their first camera had lousy video. Lousy might be too harsh of a word, but the video wasn't very good. It wasn't HD. But the time it would have taken them to develop an HD camera, put it in that form factor, get it in the price range where they needed it to be, would have really delayed their time to market and wouldn't have made a difference in the adoption. Right? All they would have lost is that year or 2 years and all the money, right? And the opportunity cost. So that polishing the cannonball sometimes can really, really hurt somebody because in that absence of a year, somebody else might come. You never know who else is out there. You just don't have any time to waste. So I would encourage you to think about your project roadmap, your development roadmap in those three buckets.
Roger London, thank you so much for sharing all this information, experience, and wisdom with us today.
My pleasure. And I hope everyone gets some value from it. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks again to Roger, and thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Frank Felker saying I'll see you on the radio.
Forgiving your entrepreneurial sins with a gentle wave of his microphone, here's Frank Felker.